Now, I would like to introduce you to today's speaker, Donald Hester. Donald is a director at Maze. His clients include local municipalities, nonprofits, corporations, and federal government agencies, specializing in a wide array of compliance programs, audits, and security assessments. He is a guest lecturer and speaker on security topics and has served on various advisory committees as a subject matter expert in information technology and security. Donald has taught IT audit and forensics at various universities and colleges. He graduated with honors from the American Military University with a bachelor's degree in security management with a concentration in information security. Donald received his master's degree from Biola University. With that, Donald, welcome, and thank you for teaching the class today. It's off to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that nice introduction for me. Please, as we go through this, if you have questions as we go, let's make it interactive. I know it's Friday, but it's Friday morning, so hopefully you guys are all excited that it's the weekend coming up. Even if you're stuck at home. But please ask questions as we go. And if you have any questions for me after this, you can certainly email me. My Twitter handle is @SOBCA. You can check that out. It's primarily all cybersecurity stuff. So following it might be interesting to hear some of the interesting news that's going on in our world today as it relates to cybersecurity. Also, I do a lot of other talks that are online, so you can go to Bright Talk and look at there, or you can go to YouTube and check those out as well. I'll reference some of them during this session because I don't want to spend all day talking to you. If you're interested in certain topics, I can give you a link to where you can go to learn more about those. So where do we start? Everybody pretty much is saying that 2020 is like one of the worst years ever, I guess is what a lot of people are saying. And I have to say I probably agree with them. Every time you turn around, something new is happening that's crazy out there. But cybersecurity still is an issue. And in fact, there's some troubling trends related to that. Public Management Magazine, which is the magazine of ICMA, the organization and international organization of city managers and stuff of that nature, they had their last month's issue was on cybersecurity. Which means that this is kind of important when they take a whole magazine and dedicate it to security, especially when it deals with local governments. And yes, mostly this is cities, not so much districts, but there's a lot of district related stuff in it as well. One of the things that was troubling is that we had 174 US municipalities that had ransomware attacks in 2019. That is an increase of 60% from last year, but that's only ones that have reported it. We know of some organizations that have been hit with ransomware, maybe not to the extent that the entire city was shut down for days or weeks or months, but maybe a couple systems were hit and those few systems were out for a while. This is actually underreported. There's more than 174. That should be something that we should pay attention to at this point in time. Especially most of you, I'm assuming, are probably in the finance side of things. I know that sometimes during budget season or during payroll, it's very stressful period of time because you have deadlines and you have to meet those deadlines. Well, can you imagine now you have to meet those deadlines and now you don't have access to your systems? And so what are you going to do? Bust out an abacus or a 10 key and start, creating tons and tons of tape? I mean, it's not really practical, is it? So there are some definitely impacts that affect us in our ability to do our job or your ability to do your job. And that's just dealing with ransomware. There's other things. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I mean, I'm talking about cybersecurity, so I sort of kind of do travel in that. But the other thing is the average ransom that has been requested of those local governments has been about $1 million per attack. And this has gone up too when, no, I think Atlanta and Baltimore, two of the bigger cities that got hit first, were tens of thousands of dollars was the ransom that was asked for. And now they're asking smaller organizations, cities far smaller than that, asking them for $1 million or more. So there's this troubling trend that if you want to get out of the ransomware as soon as possible, you have to pay the ransom, and now it's becoming more expensive. It's becoming more expensive because the bad guys know you're willing to pay. So the FBI said, we recommend you don't pay, but now they went back on that and said, we understand that there's operational requirements and that you may need to pay in order for you to be able to continue to provide services. So again, troubling trends, because that means that from the bad guys' point of view, crime is paying. And if it's paying, then they're more likely to attack. And they, with local governments, how much money you have in the bank is, public knowledge, right? They can read a CAFR. They can see that you have assets. Maybe they can't really read a CAFR. I'm giving them maybe too much credit. But they can look at it and understand that you have assets and you have the ability to pay. And maybe you don't have the ability to pay right now because of COVID, right? There's some troubling things in the current situation, and I kind of monitor this. GFOA had a report, I think it was in March. There was a webinar and I attended it, and one of the things that they said is that the average cybersecurity is only 2% of the total IT budget. Now, let me say that again. The amount of money that you're spending to prevent ransomware shutting down of the complete city is only 2% of the IT budget. So this is somewhat troubling. They noted that it was troubling, and they weren't necessarily cybersecurity professionals, but their concern was that there wasn't enough money being spent or enough resources being applied to mitigating cyber risk to your organizations. Now we have COVID-19, the pandemic that's out. So now we have this remote workforce, and we had to turn that on overnight. Normally, when you want to start a new initiative, and if you wanted to start the process and go through the proper, vetting and understanding of the risks and making sure that you've mitigated the risk before you move to an online or remote workforce, usually that takes, for local governments, could take up to 2 years to go through all, go through a bid process. But before you even go to a bid process, you have to figure out how are you going to do remote workforce? How are you going to mitigate the risks of doing it? Well, we took all of that and we got it done in 2 weeks, right? So did we really look at all the risks related to that? Probably not. And in fact, we know it hasn't, because there's been a lot of attacks against remote tools like Zoom and other tools that people are using. There's been attacks addressed against those. So were we ready for those? No, we weren't. And so some people got hit with some malware related to that. Then on top of all of that, especially for local governments, maybe not as much for districts, depending upon where your revenue sources are, but if your city does depend on sales tax, and since that's going to be down, there's a revenue shortfall. So a lot of people are saying, and I've listened to lots of different webinars right now about how to deal with this on the financial side, and they're talking about, just do spending cuts across all departments. Well, unfortunately, one of the problems you have with that is that you're not spending enough on cybersecurity now, and then you want to cut it. And there's an increase in cyber attacks during this pandemic. So local governments are continuing to be a target. It's going up. So spending less money on it is going to put you in a worse position. And I understand that you're already in a bad position. Some local governments are in a bad position as well. Enough to get on the news that you have to cut millions out of the budget or whatever. And then on top of that, most IT staff, just for our audit clients, most of them are understaffed. Most IT departments are understaffed. And then, so you're asking too much from them, and then all of a sudden you have this pandemic, so now they have stress and they have fatigue, and then they're going to make mistakes because they're being overworked because you don't have enough staff. So there's a lot of factors here that are kind of coming together that could be bad for us. So if we're cutting the cybersecurity budgets, and then on top of that, just in general, local governments have a low maturity of governance of information and technology in general. So in other words, you're more susceptible to risk than other organizations that may be of similar size that aren't local governments. I think one of the issues that we have is that a lot of local governments will look at other local governments to compare themselves with, and I don't think you should do that. I don't think you should go for good. I think you should go for great. And I think that if all local governments in general are kind of like, 2 steps behind industry, I don't think you should be looking to your peers necessarily to say, okay, where are they and where should we be? If in general all local governments are there, you should try to exceed that to kind of help with that. So with all of that, we're kind of coming to this perfect storm scenario here as far as what you can see. And I know that just this week, you heard about the Twitter hack, right? So people are hacking people's Twitter accounts. And after they hack those accounts, they're putting out fraud related stuff, trying to get people to invest in some kind of scam that ends up not being really an investment, just, a way to steal people's money. And lots of money was already lost because they hit some high profile targets. Now if Obama's and Bill Gates and Elon Musk's and all their Twitter accounts can be hacked, do you think that your Twitter or the city's Twitter or the city manager's Twitter's accounts can be hacked? Certainly, for sure. Obviously, those were targeted because they were trying to hit high-profile people that had a lot of followers, and that people that they trust. If Bill Gates said thing, oh, maybe that's true. That's really his account. And so we have to watch out for those types of things. And we've seen this huge increase in COVID-related what we call social engineering or fraud trying to take place. Everything from emails saying, hey, do you want to check on your check from the federal government, your stimulus money for COVID-19, click here. And people are clicking on it because they think the federal government's trying to give them an update on where their stuff is. Also, bank accounts have been, not the bank accounts, but people saying, hey, this is your B of A account, and we need to check your identity because of COVID-19 or something like that. Someone tried to give you a deposit and we turned it down, so you need to click on this to check on it and log in. Then it takes you to a website where you type in, you think it's B of A, and you type in your username and password. The bad guy then has it, and then they log into your bank account. And then they start transferring funds. The bad guys also understand, in addition to this, that adds to the perfect storm, that everybody is on a remote workforce. And so they understand that employees are working from home, and an employee cannot just walk across the office and say, hey, did you ask for this wire transfer? Because it seems a little fishy, or are you really asking for that? And so what ends up happening, because people are working from home, they're cutting corners on internal controls. And because they're just trying to get stuff done, because it's already more difficult to do it at home than it is in the office, and so they can't necessarily verify right away. So then we're seeing an increase in those types of fraud and stuff like that. And so Edmund had a question. It says, please provide guidance on appropriate amount of cybersecurity, what is useful for a metric. I will get to that. You're a little ahead of the game, good job. But I will get to that by the end. And if I still don't answer your question, you just ask me. Because that's a very good question, is like, what do we need to do? In addition to that, we have, and this is another, it's a cyber risk that not necessarily a city can do anything about, but you become the victim of it. And that is that there's growing evidence that a lot of the Twitter accounts and other accounts, social media accounts that are out there calling for riots and protests and all that stuff, and agitating some of the protests that are going on, are coming from Russian hacker accounts. In other words, they're fake accounts that are run by bots, which are just, automated scripts that are posting things to cause people to become more agitated and cause more damage and riot and those types of things. And certainly then the city now has a bigger problem. One, relying on the sentiment of social media may not be an accurate indication, because we know that I think one of the statements from the RSA conference in Japan this year, or I think it was in Singapore, sorry, that was going on this week. One of the things that they said is up to like 50% of the accounts calling for riots, up to 50% of the accounts on Twitter that were calling for riots were from Russian hackers. So this is something we need to take into consideration. Unfortunately, that fake news problem has been a problem for a very long period of time. I just posted something on Twitter earlier this morning. You can check it out. You may recall back in the 90s where there was a fake news story that Hillary Clinton was doing some pedophile stuff at a local pizza place, and some guy went in with a gun to go shoot everybody up because he believed it. So unfortunately, that fake news does have impacts, and that does have an impact on a local government when you have riots downtown, because it's agitating it, and people don't know the difference. And unfortunately, that is going to that's going to have a financial impact on local government, even if it's only overtime for police or whatever, but there's still going to be that type of an impact on it. And one of the other things that just came out yesterday is that during COVID-19, attacks on healthcare went up. Attacks on COVID-19 research centers went up, including Stanford, who is one of the leading organizations investigating COVID. They went up in attack. They got hit with ransomware too. One example or one data point on that is that attacks doubled in India during the first 2 months of COVID-19. So things are not getting better with cybersecurity. You would think maybe they would back off. Talking to some Russian hackers, one of the presentations at RSA conference, one of the presenters was talking to some hackers on back channels on the internet, and found out they just hate us. Literally, the ones from the former Soviet Union countries, they just hate us. And they will do anything they can to disrupt our nation. So that's a little scary on top of it. So it's not just money motivated. So they're not just necessarily trying to get money out of us. They also just want to sow discord. And we're in such a situation now with COVID-19 and with the racial inequality that we have here in America that it's really a powder keg. And cybersecurity certainly is a part of that. So what can I tell you about cybersecurity? One of the things is, one of the difficulties that we have is that cybersecurity is now starting to include more and more devices. You have smart cities coming online. You're connecting your traffic signals systems to your network. You have SCADA-based systems if you have utilities that are now interconnected. All of these things are now things that we're putting all together and we're connecting them, and they bring good value to the organization and to our citizens, but unfortunately they also leave us with risk. And a single mouse click on the wrong email can bring all of that down. And so that is, it's crazy that just a single mouse click can do that. So definitely something that we want to pay attention to. And if a single mouse click can do that, maybe we should kind of address it, right? So one of the a growing number of cybersecurity criminals and other malicious groups are, like I said, exploiting COVID-19 outbreak with all kinds of different attacks on COVID-19. And if you've seen any of my previous presentations, one of the things I point out is that they focus on fear. And there's a lot of fear with people because of COVID-19. And because of that fear, people are making rash decisions, or they're making decisions and they're not thinking through the process. Oh, this email looks like it is suspicious. Maybe I should check first, right? So that check is being circumvented because there's a fear, and this is just a psychological thing. Unfortunately, the bad guys understand that psychological thing, and so they send an email that engenders fear, and then people click on it. And people's heightened fear because of COVID-19, because of riots and stuff like that, is way high. I don't know if that's a technical term, but it's way high. So I'll leave it at that. But and one of the things that they're looking at is vulnerabilities in software, like remote working tools, such as Zoom. Zoom's been one of the ones that's been hit really hard. And to their credit, they're trying to fix everything. And that's good. We want to see them doing that. They weren't ready for the scale up that everybody was asking for them when overnight we became, you know, web conference experts, right? Which is really good. I do have a story related to that. I'm in a veterans group. We have a lot of old guys that used to come together. We go to the Veterans Hall and we'd have meetings once a month. And so some of them, the older ones, kind of feel left out. So we actually started doing meetings in Microsoft Teams for them. And we actually get 90-year-old people getting onto it. They can figure it out, right? So you can teach older folks new tricks, right? We can all do it. And that's a good thing for us. So we're adapting to it. Our world's adapting to it, but the bad guys are also adapting to it, right? And so we need to just be cognizant of that and understand that that when we're using these remote tools, we need to make sure that it's secure, right? And that's one of the things that we need to see. And just remember that those are going up. We need to tell our users that, so that anytime there's something related to something that says, like, you need to change your Zoom password, you should say, I wonder if that's true. Or your Microsoft Office 365 account. Do I really need to change my password? Why is it telling me this? Why is it trying to scare me, right? You should always tell your employees to check with IT before they actually just go and change like a password or something like that. If at all it seems suspicious. And most of the time it's probably going to be suspicious because there's not a whole lot of times where you're going to get an email saying you need to change your password, right? But this is how cyber criminals get your credentials, and then they get your credentials and then they impersonate you, asking for wire transfers or whatever, or other types of things. So the estimated total amount of ransoms paid for 2019, and this is an estimate that came out earlier this year, was $25 billion. And it's considered to be higher in 2020. So in other words, it's on its way up. And we need to, obviously, one of the recommendations is that we bolster our security. And I'll talk to you what areas you can bolster it in to really kind of help your organizations out. But this is kind of troubling because think about this. Cyber criminals, $25 billion industry. Do you think crime pays? Unfortunately, in this case, it does. Does that mean they're going to increase it, or are they going to go on to something else? No, it means they're going to increase it, right? So ransomware is going up and they're making more money on it. So we're more of a target today than we were yesterday. And we have less money and resources to take care of that. So we need to take that into consideration. One thing that they're adding on to this is they're not only are they hitting organizations with ransomware, and 2 years ago I made this prediction and I said that this was coming, and then last year I said here's some examples of it, and now this year here it is. They're actually stealing the data, hitting you with ransom. If you say you're not going to pay the ransom, they say, well, then we'll take all this data that we stole and we're going to put it on the internet. So another encouragement to get you to pay. Now for local governments, you may not have a lot of information that they have that you'd be concerned about. But think about it, you do have personnel information. You have personnel information about police officers and where they live and other information that is vital that, if put on the dark web, could lead to actual physical harm to those individuals. So it's a matter of life and death at this point in time with that type of information for that group of individuals. That's a piece of data that you have in your networks, right? So there is information that can be very damaging. And so we have to take that into consideration. And so they may force you to pay, otherwise they may leak that information. And that would be a very bad situation to be in. So what else do we find? So I could tell you about Russians, Russian hacker groups, and I'm not saying necessarily that the nation state's involved in it, although I'm implying it very a lot, but whether the nation state's behind the hackers or not is obviously not something that I can say definitively, but all indications point in that direction. And now we have other types of things that, and this doesn't affect you, it does affect like an accounting firm who may be doing business with an organization that has a Chinese business, or doing business in China where they have to pay taxes, and then they may ask an accountant to come in and fill out their tax forms for them. So they have free software for you to get. It's legitimate tax software provided by the Chinese government, but guess what? It gives the Chinese government, or hackers, complete access to your system once you've installed that software. And it's software that you have to install to fill out the tax forms for them. So nation states are very much involved in this process. No, we haven't missed any polling questions. One's coming up here in 2 slides. Anyway, sorry. So tax software that is legitimate is having hidden tax in there. You have seen the UK and US government make recommendations that if you use TikTok, you shouldn't be doing it, or at least that you should assume that the Chinese government has access to it, right? Zoom, when it first came out, was sending data through Chinese servers for some of their meetings. So this could be a concern if you're having a business meeting, if you're a business and you're having a meeting, you were talking about stock, or something that might be considered insider trading. All of a sudden now that information was routed through China and the Chinese government had access to it. Some of the encryption keys used for Zoom is also going through China. So this is another concern. That means that they could break it if they had the ability to do it. And now network tools or devices that we've bought from China have now been found to have malicious code built into them, or malicious hardware built into the actual hardware that's running the internet. So these are a bunch of different stories I've kind of all put together that are all related to China and China's espionage activities. And you may think, well, why China doesn't really care about my my doings and what I'm doing on TikTok? Maybe, maybe not. They can use all of that information and put it together to find out information about where you work. They may be able to use that information for blackmail purposes. We know that the Twitter, and this is just coming out to light, there's a talk that the Twitter breach that happened may have been somebody inside helping people on the outside do it. And so reasons why internal people might do that is they're either disgruntled for some reason, or they may be being blackmailed. So things to consider, right? Not that I'm saying that China would blackmail you based upon what you have on TikTok, but maybe they would. So again, it's a crazy world that we live in today, and you don't have to just worry about criminals. You have to worry about nation states. And if a nation state targets you, they have sufficient resources to kind of do this. The other thing that and I tell all my clients all the time, make sure you change your passwords on a regular basis. Make sure they're, complex. And everybody's like, I don't want to do that. Well, get rid of passwords then and get multi-factor authentication, right? Or keep up with your passwords. And make sure that your systems are patched. These are things that I'm always telling, and it's always, it's something that if you're not doing it, that you'll hear from it if you're on our audits. But this is still a problem. And this is the biggest ways that people are getting into your systems, or once they're in your systems, they're able to stay in your systems, patching systems should not be a problem. We've been talking about patching your system since the 90s. Why are we still not doing this, right? This is the biggest area. And so, okay, so why are we doing this? So one of the things that we find is that people are running old systems, and the old systems or part of their financial application or permitting system can't run on anything other than Windows XP, and the city doesn't want to upgrade it. Well, that puts you at greater and greater risk each year that you have in place Windows 7 machines or obsolete software that is no longer supported by the vendor. So I have a bunch of cities that have financial applications that are running on server 2003. It is no longer and has not been supported by Microsoft in a very long time. It is riddled with holes, and if anyone gets inside your system, they will own that box instantly. It's not like it's going to be difficult for the criminals to break into it. You are at extremely high risk. If somebody is able to get past anything, in other words, one employee click on something, if they can get into your system, the fact that you have obsolete software puts you at high risk. And then the ability for you to recover from that is at a high risk as well. So it's like a double whammy. So making sure that we change the passwords and take that seriously, or get rid of passwords altogether and come up with multi-factor authentication or smart cards or some other type of login method, and making sure that we patch things and get rid of obsolete software, we would go a long ways to prevent a lot of this. So yes, there's a bunch of things. I think, Catherine, somebody's raising their hand. If you want to see what.
Yes, let's see. Oh, no, it disappeared.
Oh, well, you
I
can
think it,
tell them they can type it in there and then all that. So anyways.
yeah.
So because they didn't have choice, UCSF had to pay $1.14 million after being hit with ransomware. So now they say that even though they're doing COVID research, that wasn't hit, that particular area. They were able to continue doing the COVID research. There was also another news article that just recently came out that said the Russian hackers have been found trying to break into COVID-19 research centers. And obviously the reason for that is they want to, try to get a leg up on their research by taking our research. So again, politically motivated in that instance. And of course, most of the local governments probably are not going to have to worry about that particular attack. But the fact that, we said it's about $1 million, we now see that it is about $1 million. So anyways, and
should we launch
okay.
a polling question?
Yeah, you can do that. And while you do that, I think someone came up with a question that says, with the Chinese server security issues, do you think Lenovo laptops are safe for purchase? That's a good question. So this polling question you got to answer just to make sure you're still here and alive, and so you can get your CE credit. Anyways, so somebody said, no, they're not there. And two people said maybe. And I can kind of agree with that one. I feel like maybe I'm here. Anyways, with security issues with that, that's a tough one. Because we use Lenovo quite a bit, and I'm always searching to make sure that any of the products that we purchase are not on any list. So I think part of it is continuing to do ongoing threat analysis. So your IT folks should be doing that, and that is monitor all the news feeds and all the advisories that come out from DHS for Lenovo to make sure that if anyone finds anything, that you are notified of it and then take appropriate action at that point in time. There have been, and I don't know that I would necessarily agree with this, there have been some organizations that will not buy any hardware bought from China, manufactured in China at this point in time. And there are others that won't take any software that's developed in China. I don't know if I'd go that far, but be cautious is what I'd say. be very cautious going forward, and then pay attention to, because a lot of people are testing this stuff all the time. If Lenovo had, people are looking for those little extra chips and the little hidden stuff in there, and we're finding it in certain devices in certain places. So you should, if it was in Lenovo, I think you would find out fairly soon. Anyways, so. Anyways.
Okay, I'm going to just remind people that if you missed the polling questions, or if you for some reason cannot type in your answer, please just let us know your name under the chat so that we can still give you credit. Okay, thank you, Don.
Yes, and at the rate that I'm going, you're probably going to get more than an hour's worth of CE. So, sorry.
Which is fine.
But one of the other things that we had, I kind of talked about this earlier, and that is that our networks are kind of growing, and we're putting all kinds of stuff on the networks. All of a sudden now we have this thing of Internet of Things that's becoming an issue. In other words, we're putting more stuff on our networks: security cameras, door locks, all kinds of mechanical monitors and SCADA type of things, or industrial controls, all being put together on our networks. So we're seeing this expansion of Internet of Things exceeding the number of devices that we thought we were going to have by 2020. We're like doubling what we thought we would have on the network. So it's growing exponentially and faster than we thought it was going to. And because of that, that's a bigger area of risk. So we want to be careful about those types of things. You know, you have a department that says, hey, we want to buy these new cameras, or we want to get this new device that connects to the network. At that point in time, a risk assessment needs to be done. If the IT department is not a part of that equation, there's a problem there in your governance within your government. In other words, how can Parks and Rec make a decision on whether or not something is secure, or what risk it's going to bring to the city if somebody in cybersecurity or IT hasn't addressed that, right? So that's the problem that I think we're running into, is that there's a lot of that happening. So what are some of the risks that you have to do with remote workers? It depends upon the network that they're on, their home network. How secure is their home network? Their home network is nowhere near as secure as your network at the office. In fact, just to make more doom and gloom, sorry, there was an article just the other day that said most home routers are susceptible to attack. In other words, they have vulnerabilities in them that people can break into and get into people's home networks. So we kind of feel safe at home. We spend a lot of money on locks and keys and try to make sure that people can't break into our house. We may even have an alarm system, but then on our network side, we pretty much let everybody in. So this can be a bad thing. And that means that they can get into that employee's home network, get onto, even if you provided them with a laptop from the city or the district, they could get into that once they're on their network, and then from there get into your, however you're connecting them remotely, there's a potential that they can get into the cities or districts' internal network. So you've now expanded your network to everybody's home network, right? And everybody's home network is not secure. Right? Now, what if those people are using their personal devices to get into these areas? What if, like the other day, we had a power outage because I live in a fire area. So we had a fire, we had to evacuate. I had to do some work. So I had to go to Starbucks to log in. I'm in a public hotspot. That's a major risk. I had to get the work done. I had to respond. So I didn't have another choice. So unfortunately, and I'm one that doesn't like to use public hotspots because they're a major risk, but I had to do it in order to get stuff done. I did everything I possibly could to minimize my risk. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I did the most. I knew I still had some risk. Most other people don't understand that. They just flop onto hotspots all the time, and then they're connected in. And then that is another way to introduce risk to you. Email scams may be harder for us to stop because they can't just talk to the person in the other cubicle next to them and say, hey, I just got this email, it looks a little fishy. They have nobody to ask, so they go, well, I'll just click on it, right? So they're taking shortcuts where they shouldn't normally do it. And not that cities have a lot of problems, but any employee that is a rogue employee that might be doing something like Twitter employees who are all working from home may be harder to catch because they're working remote, and so you may not see it. So a good question. What do you do are some of the things that you can do when you work at Starbucks. So the thing that you want to do is to make sure that you're using your VPN to do the connection. So if you're on a mobile device like your phone or something and you get onto it, before you get onto the network and try to get your email, initiate a VPN connection, then try to get your email, right? Because you can get on the wireless, just connect in and go to Outlook web access. If you have that, go to your web version of your email. You could do all that kind of stuff just right on the network. So don't do that. Initiate that VPN connection first and then go through it. If you're on your cell phone, it's a little bit more difficult to do that, but they do make VPN software for your cell phones where you can connect in. At least then the person has got a secure channel from the device to your network, and then they can go and access the data, right? So VPNs are a must in this type of situation. Remote desktop is not the same as a VPN, so don't use remote desktop to do it. If you have to use remote desktop, do the VPN first, then do the remote desktop, right? So initiate the VPN first. That will secure the traffic between your device and your network, then do whatever you need to do. And that will mitigate a lot of the risks, probably 95% of them. There still is a potential that if the VPN that you're using is an old one that's not up to date, not patched, or you have a weak password, that somebody could break into that VPN tunnel or be able to get into that VPN tunnel in the future because of a flaw that you have in it. So making sure that that software is up to date and your passwords are strong, or your encryption keys are strong for it, is really important. So good question. Advice: start VPN first, then do whatever you got to do. Don't just think, oh, I don't want to do that, I'll just get on the Outlook web access. No, because then there's a potential they could get your password there. So you want to be very careful about that kind of stuff. So now that's all the doom and gloom. Sorry. I promise I'll try and keep that to a minimum now, but that's just the world we live in, right? I guess we're getting used to it. We're going to be very jaded when this all gets done, right? But we're survivors and we're going to get through this, right? So potential impacts: we could have no access to our systems. Cities or districts could lose money. The question is not if, it's when. In cybersecurity, people have been saying this for a few years now. It's not a matter of if you're going to get hit. In other words, that there's a possibility you may not get hit. You're going to get hit. And the question is when. And the next question they say is you can either pay now or you can pay more later. Right? The normal saying is now or pay later. No, you're going to pay now. In other words, spend some money on cybersecurity controls, or you're going to pay much more later. Right? The security controls necessary to prevent ransomware is far cheaper than the cost of the whole city being down for 2 months, or in the recovery process for 2 months. It's far cheaper, right? So we either pay now or we pay later. And I understand there's financial risks right now, and you have bigger problems maybe. But yeah, put on top of those big problems the fact that you don't have access to your system, right? That doesn't help things. It actually makes everything worse. And the impact is beyond just downtime. It's not just that you don't have access to your data. You may never be able to recover your data, right? So that could be even a bigger impact. Not only that, the more you get hit with cyber issues, your bond rating is going to get affected, which is going to cost you more money later, right? And in your insurance are going to go up. So there's other costs that get associated with being hit by ransomware. So we want to minimize that as much as possible. There's some easy things we can do: changing your passwords on a regular basis, changing to multi-factor authentication. IT is going to say it's a difficult task to do that. It is, but it's well worth it as far as how much risk it will mitigate. It can really help prevent ransomware going across your network. So if it hits one system, it doesn't hit all your systems. Multi-factor authentication is one of the biggest items that the Department of Homeland Security says that you can do to minimize your risk for ransomware impact. Not necessarily getting hit with it, but the impact of it. In other words, containing it. That's one of the biggest things there. So cybersecurity, what's the role of cybersecurity? Well, if you're a leader in cybersecurity like I am, and you're trying to tell everybody else this, I want you to understand the role of cybersecurity is to help enable business operations. We don't want to stop you from doing your job. We want to help you prepare for what risks you're going to encounter and help you mitigate those risks so that you can continue to do your mission, your goals, your objectives. Finance needs to be able to do their work. They need to be able to do payroll, they need to be able to do budgets, they need to be able to pay bills, they need to be able to do all those things. And the idea of cybersecurity is to help you be able to do those things, not prevent you from doing those things. And I understand sometimes you're saying, well, you making me change my password every 90 days is really a pain in the butt. I get that, but it is far less of a problem to change your password every 90 days than it is to be hit by something like ransomware, or doing some training on cybersecurity so that your employees know what to look out for fraud, so that when the fraud happens, they say, hey, that looks like the fraud that I learned about last month. Right? So cybersecurity awareness training is huge, very important, and it's one of the things that we still don't have everybody doing. And one of the things that I do point out a lot is that cybersecurity is a risk management decision. So it's not really an IT decision, and I know that seems counterintuitive, but I'll get to that. Really what we're talking about is proper governance, and that is that the executives, the city manager, assistant city manager, administrative services director, whoever, have the information that they need in order to make a decision about risk. And I know that from listening to lots of city council meetings, most city councils don't even understand cyber risk, and they don't even understand how important it is. And it's kind of our job to make sure that they do understand that. It's part of part of duty of a government employee is to make sure that they have everything they need to make their decisions, so that we can make our decisions, so that we can do that. So again, in the same public management magazine for June 2020, they had a whole article about this, and that cybersecurity should make your organization more awesome. Don't you want your organization to be more awesome, right? So cybersecurity is going to push for more governance. In other words, making sure that IT is bringing value to the organization so that you can do your mission, your job, obtain your goals, and do what you need to do. That's the whole point of it. I think in the past, especially in the first part of this session, there's a lot of scary stuff out there. And I don't like to lead with scary stuff. This is the other side of the coin. It's actually good for your organization. It can actually bring you more uptime, bring you better quality software, better quality services. Don't you want that? I think everybody wants that. No IT organization is perfect. That's the first thing we need to recognize. All of them can become better. Every one of your organizations could be better at IT. Even if you don't see any problems, doesn't mean it's perfect, right? So we can become better. That gives you the ability to do your job better. Maybe it gives you the ability to do your job in a new way, in a better way, it's better for constituents, right? So it's not all gloom and doom, and I hate to lead with fear, especially in COVID, especially in 2020, right? But I want to make sure that we understand that, hey, there's a good side to all of this. It's not just about mitigating risks, it's just about being better. And we all want to be better, don't we? So what to do? What can you do right now? Well, I hate to say it, but cutting spending in cybersecurity is probably not a really good decision. You should be increasing it when it's only 2% of your IT budget. You should be increasing it. The GFOA in the webinar I watched did not come up with like a percentage of what it should be. It would have been nice if they would have had one, like what are some of the best local governments and how much are they spending in cybersecurity? Like the ones that are not getting hit, or the ones that did get hit, but it only was a little inconveniencing didn't spread very far and it wasn't that big of a deal. I would like to see how much they spend on it so that you guys can have a benchmark on that. So all of you that are members of GFOA, maybe you want to let them know that you'd like to that kind of information, because they may be able to get that kind of information. The other thing is implementing governance of information and technology. And I'll walk you through all of that here in a bit. Also, then mitigate the risks of ransomware and fraud. The two biggest things hitting local governments is ransomware and then some type of wire transfer fraud, where somebody sends an email and says, hey, we changed our ACH information, we need the payment right away. That type of fraud is the biggest risks out there in ransomware. Those are things that local governments are getting hit with all the time. And one of the big ways of doing that is making sure that we have cybersecurity awareness and training for all staff, because we don't want them working on things that they're not supposed to. And even if you give them training, even if you tell them, even if I tell them every day or every week or whatever it is, people will still click on things that they shouldn't have clicked on. That when looked at is obviously it's fraud. We can't protect from all of that. What we can do is, hit for the 90% on that one. Try to get as many people as educated as possible to make sure that they understand what to look for. And interestingly enough, the employees that are clicking on things, and I have a recent example of this, are ones that are not doing the cybersecurity awareness training, right? So this is the important thing, is to make sure that everybody gets included into it, including the city manager. He should be leading by example. Finance director, leading by example. You should say that cybersecurity awareness training and fraud training is important. Then your employees will see that it's important, and then it'll follow, right? So we got to set the tone at the top. We got to make sure everybody knows that. So some of the things that can be done here is you need to be able to have the talk with senior management. Do they understand the cyber risks? If you're a finance director and you do not understand the cyber risks, you need to get IT and security, or somebody in cybersecurity at the table and say, hey, what are the risks to our ERP system? I know that we're still running Windows 7, or we know that we're running older application. What are the levels of risk that we have in doing that, right? And I always get to ask this question, so I'll just answer it right now, because I'm sure somebody's going to ask it here in a second. If I have, it's expensive to upgrade every, 5 years or whatever it is for the ERP system, would it be better to go to a cloud solution? In this case, yes. Cloud solutions are typically updated by the vendor. You want to make sure there's a lot of different cloud versions out there. Some of them just take your server and stick it in the cloud, and it's not really a cloud solution. In other words, the application is not necessarily in the cloud. They just take a server and just virtualize it and stick it in the cloud. That means that it still has the same problem of not being updated on a regular basis. So you want to make sure that it gets updated. You're not using old software. So getting some of the newer ones that are just an application that's in the cloud that they keep up to date is really good. Not only that, it makes it a lot easier for people to do remote work. So moving to the cloud for organizations that did that made the right choice, because there's probably better security in most of those cloud solutions. Not that you should assume that. You should actually do some type of vetting of that, make sure that whoever's doing it has an audit done on their services, and then understanding your role and what you should be doing, because you're the one that has to set up the user accounts. You're the one that gives them the rights. So even if it's in the cloud, there's still controls that the local government's going to have to do, right? So is senior management, do they have that information? Do they know that so they can make the decision? So when they're going to buy a new ERP system, were they told that so they can say, oh, well, that's an important thing to think about. So are we going to be in this position again in 5 years? Or now that I know that there's this risk, maybe we can move to that.
There's a question, Don, on the.
Yeah, go ahead.
What are key questions to ask a cloud server provider to ensure they have good practices and secure cloud?
So you're going to want, most cloud service providers are going to have an audit. So the thing that you're going to want to ask is to see that audit or the results of that audit. Most organizations will have that. Some of them, they'll require you to file an NDA or sign an NDA that you're not going to disclose it. I think and I don't know if it's just because I'm the auditor, when we asked like Tyler Systems, when we ask to see their audit, they'll make us sign a non-disclosure agreement for that. So I don't know if they'll ask you to sign it if you're the client, but they may ask you to see that. You're going to want to see that. And then you need to understand what parts of the controls are you're responsible for and what kind of controls are they going to be responsible for. So all your normal controls that you would normally have, make sure that they're in the cloud. That's pretty much it. Make it simple. That's the easiest way to put it. So if you had to talk with your council members. Now, I've done a whole a presentation on this. I think it was an hour and a half long or maybe 2 hours, so I'm not going to spend 2 hours talking about this. But you can go to my Bright Talk or YouTube channel and you can see more information about that. We recently did it for MESAC, which is the IT California IT Directors Association. So we did that for them. So the other thing is cybersecurity awareness and training, which is what we kind of talked about earlier. And do you have an effective program? In other words, do you know what's effective? Is it actually stopping things, right? You can run tests to do that. Your users are your first and last line of defense. So have you given them what they need in order for them to protect themselves? And we do a lot of cybersecurity awareness training for a lot of different local governments. You don't have to go through us, but you should go through somebody, and you should have some type of training. You want to see if it is specific to local governments, because local governments may have some particular requirements. Anyways, there was a question that says, I only saw one CPE question. Are there 2 more? Yes, they're coming. Sorry. We're taking a little bit longer than we had planned. So cybersecurity awareness, really good thing. Again, there's a session I did on that. You can check that out on my YouTube channel or Bright Talk. Ransomware risk assessment. Again, one of the things that you could do is like, there's guidance out there on what you should do about ransomware. Are you doing those things? Has anyone ever asked that question of IT? Are you doing what we need to do? Here's the standard. What are you doing all those things? To answer the question is no, most organizations haven't done that. Do you have the necessary controls in place to prevent or minimize the impact of ransomware? So we actually took all the guidance that was available out there and we put it all together in one checklist, and it's free to you, so you can go check it out. It's on our website, no charge. We just give it to you. We want you to be safe. So go there, go through the questionnaire. If you answer anything as not being in place or partially in place, fix it, make it in place. You want to be able to answer all those questions. Yes, we do these things. We also do a ransomware risk assessment for a very inexpensive price. Basically, we fill out the questionnaire for you. We'll look at your vulnerability scans, and then based on that, we'll come up with an actual risk assessment that will actually write everything out, you know, so you can have a presentation and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to go through us to do it. We make it super affordable, but you can do it yourself. You can download the same questions we're going to ask you. You just won't have us doing all the calculations and writing up a report. But you don't have to. You just fill out the questionnaire, and if it says you're not doing it, do it, right? How to do it and all that kind of stuff, you may have to talk to consultants about that kind of stuff, but at least know where you're at. At least know what your risk is. We try to take, when we do the questionnaire, we actually take all your questions and we put it into our database with other local governments that we've interviewed that have been hit with ransomware. And so we looked at what their score was, and they got hit. So then we use that as our baseline, right? And we change that as we go. And so when we do our risk assessment, it's actually based on other local governments that actually were hit, what controls they didn't have in place. So you kind of know where you really are at, right? And that's what you kind of want to know, like, where are we going to be? And I know that cybersecurity is expensive, and you may not be able to afford, you know, 24/7 or have a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, somebody you can talk to, City Council, or talk to, you know, the City Manager or Administrative Service Director, somebody can talk to the people that need to know what the cyber risks are. And then there's 2 different types of organizations out there that offer services, and you can look at our YouTube channel to find that. I'm not going to talk a whole bunch about it there. There's different types of cybersecurity. There's cybersecurity on the governance side, which is kind of what we do when we do a CISO as a service, which we don't do for our audit clients because we can't be a part of the control environment. But then there's other organizations that do what we call cybersecurity operations center, where they monitor all your stuff and then they respond to it. So there's two different aspects of cybersecurity. One's more the executive management side, and one's more the boots on the ground side. And if you can't afford to employ the number of people that you would need to cover all of that, you're not going to hire one person that's going to be able to cover all of that. That's too much work for them. And yes, this is separate from IT. The IT people already are overworked and they don't necessarily have the skill sets to do these things. Cybersecurity is a separate skill set, especially on the executive side of things. In most governance frameworks, it's recommended that cybersecurity and IT are separate because there's a little checks and balances going on there that you lose if it's all everybody's wearing one hat. It's because very difficult because then you're looking for a unicorn. Catherine, you want to ask the next question for the polling?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to launch the next question. I know some of you have other commitments, so you will still get credit for the hour that you have attended the class. Just please let us know, then we can send you the survey link if you need to leave early so that we can give you the CPU certificate. But Dawn's class is really good, so I advise you to,
well,
stay with us if you can.
Thanks for selling it.
Oh, of course. I mean, I don't have to hard sell it, but I know that's, some people may have a meeting at 11 and we appreciate you, spending an hour with us.
So while you keep on answering that question, I'll just go on to the next one. Look at your controls around wire transfers, review your procedures, and then you want to do some type of what we call confirm the request out of band. So don't trust email. If a vendor sends you an email and says, we need to change this, you need to contact them to make sure that it actually came from them. So how can you do that? By looking their phone number up and actually calling them. Don't call the phone number that's on the email, because they may have changed that, the bad guys. So don't trust the email, confirm it some other way, right? Call them up and ask them. So you wanna make sure that you're doing something, we call it out of band. In other words, whatever communication method you had with them, you try a different communication method, right? That's not gonna be susceptible to the same potential fraud. So if they're in your email, you want to make sure that you're catching it. So don't trust the email. Make sure that you're going to figure it out some other way. And then there's educate staff. There's all these other tips to avoid ACH fraud. GFOA has some materials on that. If you're not doing all those things, make sure you're doing all those things. And then add on to it, because I looked at their recommendations, and they did not say confirm the request out of band. So add that to what they say, and then do everything that they're saying that you should do. And then you should be golden at that point in time. And then train your employees to look for these things, right? Have them question. It doesn't hurt to question things, right? So governance of information and technology. This gets back, I think, to Edmund's question at the beginning. What should you do, right? So governance is one of the things that you want to look into. And we use the word governance, and you understand what governance means in the financial world. We talk about internal controls and enterprise-wide risk management. All of that needs to be applied to IT, and most of the time it's not, right? So you want to make sure you're doing that. You want to make sure that you're managing cyber risk, and that management has the information necessary to make decisions. IT should not be making decisions on what ERP system you're going to buy, but you need to have the understanding from IT and cybersecurity as to what the risks are. Does it work with the systems we have? What are the risks that we're going to address? If I go with option A and option B, here's a classic one that I came across, and I use it all the time because it's a good example where it costs the city a lot of money unnecessarily. Parks and Rec wants to go get a new system for class registration. They look at these different systems. They pick this one because it's one of the cheapest and it has what they need in it, right? So they pick the system. The system that they picked had the regular card readers on it. Well, what they didn't know, they asked the right question. They said, is this solution PCI compliant? The vendor said yes. The vendor was technically not wrong. The employees were right to ask the question. The problem was it's more complicated than that. In order to be PCI compliant for the city has to make sure that the network that they put that application in and how they conduct their business is also PCI compliant. If you take a PCI compliant application, the credit card requirements, and you put it into your network, it doesn't mean that it's still compliant. It may not be compliant anymore because everything else that touches it also has to be compliant. So that was, anyways, so they ended up buying the program, never talked to IT about it. They called IT up and said, hey, we have a new service, can you set it up? And IT's like, whoa, you didn't even ask us, right? Not that IT even was able to answer the questions because they didn't understand what PCI compliance was all about. And most people aren't. It's a little complicated. It's outside most people's wheelhouse. You may have to call a professional about it and ask extra questions, but you need to make sure that you know what does it take to be compliant. So one of the things that you want to look at with that is make sure that the whole solution is compliant. Now, they could have got the same solution with a different payment processing solution. One that's called, we call it P2PE. And I'll type it in the P2PE. What that means is point-to-point encryption. What does that mean? That little device that you put the credit card in, it connects from there, encrypts it at that device all the way back to the payment processor. So your entire network is irrelevant to PCI compliance. It costs more to do that. But when you do that, your network and all the stuff that's on your network does not have to be PCI compliant. What does that mean dollar-wise? In order for this organization to get their network to be PCI compliant, they were looking at $50 million, right? Ridiculous, right? Or spend $10,000 on this other solution. There's a huge difference there, right? Now, there's other ways that they could have worked on it. If you can't do a P2PE solution, you have to get card readers that either dial up directly, not on your network, on an old analog line, or card readers that go on a cellular network and are not connected to your devices. As soon as that device connects to your network or your device, everything that device has to be compliant, and the whole network it has to be compliant. Yeah, P2PE is how you say it. Yes, that's what it is. There's a question. Somebody's curious, and so anybody else wants to answer. It says, I'm curious to find out, with all the participation on the call, if agencies are paying vendors via ACH anyway to poll this. Yeah, so maybe Catherine can set that up as a poll just to find out. That would be interesting to see how many people
or people can just raise their hands and then we can just count it.
Okay.
Which way? Do you want to raise? Okay, you can raise your hand.
Yeah, just do the raise your hand if you are, and then we can do a count there.
Oh, there we go.
As we go, I'll continue on, and then Catherine can let us know after a minute or so how many people are doing it.
And then there's a second question. Is that P2PE? Is that how you say it?
That is how you say it. Yeah.
Okay, we have 10 people. Oh, I'm sorry. Go for it. 9 people raise their hands.
Oh, 11 now.
Okay, we're going to wait for a minute.
10, 11, 9. Okay. People just keeps on going back and forth. Anyways, so now in IT, we used to call it IT governance. The problem that we ran into as auditors, and the problem that cybersecurity professionals ran into, is when we said IT governance to the board or to city manager, council, or to finance directors, is they would put their fingers in their ears and they say, ah, la, 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 that's IT, go talk to them. Okay, so to clarify that, we've changed our terminology. We don't say IT governance anymore, although some people still use it because it's a legacy term. We now say enterprise governance of information and technology. So, because governance doesn't belong to IT, it belongs to management, executive management, right? So what does that mean? So the whole idea of governance is to do 2 things, really 2 things, and that is to make sure that value is brought to the organization from IT. So IT is bringing you value. And there's all kinds of ways of looking at how you value, whether it makes things more effective or more efficient or just works, whatever it is, that brings value to the organization, helps you do your job. The other thing is that it mitigates business risk. And notice I didn't say cyber risk, I said business risk, because cyber risk is business risk. If you get hit with ransomware, yes, it's a cyber risk, but it also affects the business, right? So it's a business risk. Those are the things we have to look at. We want to make sure that the whole point of having a governance framework and implementing governance is to make sure that we bring value to the organization and we identify and address those risks. That's it. So now, this isn't new, right? COSO tells us to do those types of things, right? We need to have internal controls and enterprise-wide risk management system, right? So you're all familiar with COSO, or should be familiar with COSO. So internal control guidelines by the state of California, way back in 2015, they say, hey, you need to make sure IT is a part of this. And that's about all they said. I'm really disappointed in the document. I mean, I understand they're writing it to, they're not writing it to IT folks. They're writing it to finance people and city managers and that kind of thing. They're not writing it to, so they don't give a lot of guidance on how to do it. So they tell you, go seek guidance elsewhere. And where do you find the other guidance for governance and internal controls for IT? COBIT 2019 is probably the most well-known governance framework. Most corporations that have to have governance because of Sarbanes-Oxley and other time use COBIT 2019. So there's a lot of material out there on how to use this. The organization, the IT Governance Institute, which is a spin-off of Information System Audit and Control Association, has been around since the 60s. And they're the IT auditors. We've been around, the certification I have is one of the oldest IT certifications there is, and that's how to be an IT auditor, right? So this organization, it's not like a fly-by-night thing. It's been around. OMB often recognizes it and references it. So it's, again, that's the guidance that you probably want to follow for the governance side of things. It also talks about the management side of things, and it dovetails with other, it dovetails very nicely with other cybersecurity, what do you call it's out there, standards and guidance that's out there. So it's not like you have to do two different things. You do the same thing and you're doing it both. The important thing about all of these is that it's about the mission. It's about you being able to do your job. It's about mitigating those risks. You don't need any more financial losses, right? We don't want an extra, wire transfer that now the city's out another $1 million. We don't want that. We don't want downtime in this period of time for another month or two because of ransomware, right? So these are important things for us to address. And I know I sound like I'm preaching, but I'm the cybersecurity guy, I gotta do that. So COSO, it's enterprise-wide management. It's integrated framework that looks at enterprise risk management across it. So you have controls in there, so you can develop controls, look at your control environment. You have some type of way of doing some type of reporting and some compliance. That's what I'm talking about. This type of stuff. I want to include IT into this. That's what we're trying to look at. COSO is very generic, right? It doesn't specifically say, okay, how do you do COSO for IT? Because other things exist for that, and that's why they don't have it. So what do the internal control guidelines have from the state controller? They basically said the information technology IT department should periodically identify and communicate risk, which employees should be particularly vigilant. That is cyber risk management, right? So I took what they said and translated into you need to have cyber risk management. Okay, so we got that. The other thing it says application controls and general IT controls, which relate to the overall effectiveness of IT controls to ensure the proper operation of local government's information systems. Let me translate that. Follow industry standards. Cybersecurity standards that are out there, follow them, right? That's, there you go. So mitigate risk and follow the standards that are out there. Okay, so now what about COBIT? What does COBIT say? So COBIT is exercised in this case by council to make sure that there's a definition and implementation of processes and structures to make sure that the organization that IT is enabling the business and that people can execute their responsibilities, making sure that IT is aligned and brings value to the organization. Now, I bet you if you ask most council members that question, they would not know that that's their responsibility. It's their responsibility to set the tone for risk management throughout the organization and make sure that there is oversight in this, right? That's their job. And if they're not capable of doing it, then it's at least the city manager's job to make sure that those things are getting done, right? And of course, you know, we're all finance people right here, or IT folks, so we don't have to worry about it. That's another thing for the city manager to deal with. Well, true and no, right? So we all have to play a part in this, right? So everybody's going to have to be involved in it. This is the COBIT model, and it talks about all the different areas that you can look at. But if you look here at the top, this is the governance framework at the top. This down here at the bottom is all the management side of things. These are things they should already be doing. And if they're not doing these things, they should probably look into doing those things, right? And you can get scorecards that tell you how well you're doing at this stuff, right? There's governance, risk, and compliance software that you answer questionnaires, and it tells you what you have and where you're at with everything. And it can even help you kind of develop risk to do it. This is that full-time job of somebody doing cybersecurity at that executive level, like a CISO or security manager, that IT doesn't have time to do these things, right? This is a like separate type of thing. Not only do they not have the time to do it, a lot of this documentation on IT stuff is written in financial terms. What do I mean by that? They use the same terminology we use, like controls and all that, the same terminology finance uses, because in the 60s, when IT auditors came out, they came out of finance, right? And so when they wrote all their guidance, the guidance was written by people that were CPAs and IT professionals. So it's not written in the typical IT vernacular, it's written in the financial vernacular. So actually, as a finance person, you may understand the guidance better than they understand the guidance, because you're going to understand the terminology, unless they've been exposed to the terminology. Just a heads up on that one. So the core model, the top here, is ensure governance framework is set and that you have some type of maintenance of it. Ensure that there's benefits being brought to the organization, that you're mitigating risk. Optimization, which is a separate, they put it as a separate thing. I think of that as bringing value to the organization. So this one, ensure benefits are delivered, and optimization, I put that together and say, because I think two things are easier to deal with than three. Mitigate risk and bring value to the organization. Value is brought to the organization when you optimize your services, right? Good example, cities paying for stuff that they don't even use. Doing a periodic check of all the applications where every end user department that's using those applications signs off that they're still using those applications. IT had been buying for the police department and the local government for 5 years this software that they had not used in 5 years, to the tune of, it wasn't that much. I think it was like $20,000 or something. But here's the thing. Yeah, $20,000 isn't a drop in the bucket, but that's still a waste of money. That could be better spent somewhere else right now, right? So why are you spending, and the reason is, police department requested software, IT got it, IT kept on renewing the subscription. Police department never told them, we don't use that anymore. So governance would make sure that that didn't happen, because governance means that you actually have a list of all the applications, and annually you review these things. You talk to stakeholders to find out if it's still meeting their needs. If it's not meeting their needs, you figure out how you get them something that does meet their needs, right? There's a whole process there that's missing or absent in most organizations, and that's what we want to get, because if you have that in your organization, you're going to mitigate most of the risks that are out there, and you're going to be awesome, right? IT can be awesome again. And the last part is ensure stakeholder engagement. In other words, city manager needs to be engaged. Finance director needs to be engaged when it's something related to finance. If it's a Parks and Rec application, they need to be engaged. And their requirements need to be heard, because they have a mission to accomplish, and whatever software, services, or devices you're going to use, it needs to meet those, right? So the cybersecurity folks and the IT folks need to make sure that they have the information so they can make the decision. That's engagement stakeholders, right? So that's what we want to do. There are services out there that provide information for you. We have a question. I'm curious to find out, with all the participants on the call, if more agencies are paying vendors via ACH. Oh wait, no, that's
yeah, it was the same question. And then there were 8 people raised their hands.
Okay. Maybe they got it, went to the restroom or something. Anyways, So here's Infotech is one of the, we resell Infotech. If you're interested in, let us know. But your IT people may have it, may not have it. They actually give you all the guidance on how to implement this within your organization, right? So risk management, security strategy, availability and capacity management. There are tools available to help you do these things within your organization. And there's a lot on here to do, right? Because I mean, just performance measurements that, you know, that could take a year to figure out, you know, what do we need to manage, right? That's part of the question. So all of these things, again, this person that you would have as your cybersecurity person is going to spend all day dealing with this kind of stuff and getting your organization to a place where it can be awesome, right? That's the thing you want to kind of look at. Now, you may say, we're a small organization. We're a little tiny town. We can't do all of that. That's ridiculous. Okay, great. We have a mini version for you, right? So we understand that if you're a smaller organization, you need to still deal with some of the important stuff. You're still at the same level of risk. You just have less resources to deal with the risk. So what can we do about that? So they have a consolidated framework that they have. Infotech uses COBIT as their guide, and then they take COBIT and then give you materials to kind of help you do stuff like, here's a checklist of the stuff you need to do to have disaster recovery planning, right? And then they help you through that. And then they have training for all of this different stuff. And so it's a very, you can hire someone to come in and do it for you, or you can do it yourself, right? Infotech helps you do it yourself. If you're one of those organizations who wants to do it yourself, then you can do it here. Otherwise, if you can't do it yourself, you may have to hire somebody outside the organization, come inside your organization, help you do these things. But again, these are like some of the minimal things that you need to do. Catherine, you want to do one more polling question? Check, make sure everybody's here.
Yes, let's do that. Perfect. Are you still here?
Yeah, so somebody asked, Marissa, I don't remember seeing any surveys. These ones that are up right now, that's what you want to get your CPE credit? And if you didn't do it, let us know that it didn't work or whatever. And
oh, okay, yeah. And I can send, if you have attended our previous classes and then you have not seen the survey yet, let me see. So what we can do is, so it's the same survey for the classes. So we will send it to you.
Okay, so the polling is, you got about 30 seconds. Oh no, 20 seconds, sorry.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, so I will, for people that don't have it yet, don't get off the Zoom. Let me find the link and I will send it to you. Okay.
I got 2 more slides and then we're done. So I
Okay.
want to finish off with one more thing, and I want to make sure that this gets driven home clearly. Your success depends upon the ability of information and technology to enable you to achieve your business goals or your organizational goals. So let me say that again. Your success depends upon whether or not IT is enables you to be successful, right? You rely upon it. So you need to make sure, and if you're the finance director, you rely upon IT, you need to make sure, sorry, it's your job, make sure that it is working in a way for you in such that it enables you, sets you up for success. If it's not setting you up for success, then you need to reevaluate it. If you have the governance processes in place, you would be doing that. So my big takeaway from this is, let me sum it up. Cyber risk is business risk. You want to make sure that you're mitigating your cyber risks. And in order to be an awesome organization, you need to make sure that IT is bringing value to the organization, and in doing so helps you succeed at what you're doing. And then finally, we want to make sure that it's helping you achieve your goals, right? That's it. I mean, that's pretty much it. If there's any other questions, certainly reach out to us even after this, but we'll stay on here for about a couple minutes in case there's any questions, because we want to make sure that we answer any of those. But hopefully you all learned something today, and you can go back to your cities and ask about that governance and see what you can do to implement it.
Yeah, exactly. Like Don said, he has, I think you teach monthly, you have monthly videos in Bright Talks, right, Don? And
Yeah.
it's in a variety of subjects. Bright Talks is free to sign up. I actually took a class in it. It's very similar to Zoom, so please do check out his classes in Bright Talks. And if, like Don said, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to him. I do like your last slide about how IT is supposed to help us succeed, because I think even internally, it took a long time for our organization to understand, if something doesn't work, we should come and tell you, hey, this is not working. Like, what is the underlying reason, instead of just feeling like that's just another,
Yeah,
bureaucracy to go through.
and Catherine's right. We always encourage, I tell people, our auditors or our
Mhm.
tax folks, I said, if you're having a problem, let us know, even if it's just a minor annoyance, because maybe there's an easy solution. We had one year, once a year we get together and we have a big group conversation about, what's going on, how can we improve and all that kind of stuff. Somebody has said, oh, is this something that I've had this problem for 6 months and whatever, I don't know how to do this. And we're like, oh, that's an easy fix. Just click this. So for 6 months, they put up with an annoyance because they didn't reach out to us. And
Yeah.
we were able to fix it right away.
Now we have a question. Carol, I'm going to unmute you so that you can talk. Okay, you should be able to talk now. I think you have to unmute your, let's see.
I want to say thanks to John Holm for saying thanks, saying nice job that I did. And thanks, a couple other people did. Somebody did say, do you teach an IT auditor prep class? I have done that in the past, yes. I don't have one on the schedule right now, but it's certainly something that we could do in the future.
Okay, Carol, please go ahead.
Carol, who? Do I have my hand raised?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you
Sorry
for
about
coming.
that.
That's okay.
That's all right. You got to talk to everybody now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay, so any other questions? It happened the other day. I think somebody raised their hand and okay. Perfect. Okay, well, with that, thank you so much actually, there's another question. Can we get invites for future webinars? Yes. Like I'm thinking that you're talking about Dawn's Bright Talks. How does that work, Dawn?
Yeah, if you go onto the Bright Talk channel and you register for it, Bright Talk automatically tells you when I'm having a new one. If you want my classes, if you attended this one, next year when we do Maze Live, or next time we do Maze Live, you will get an invite for it.
Okay, and there's another question about CPE certificates for yesterday. I'm thinking you mean Wednesday. Have they gone out yet? We are still doing them in waves, because actually Wednesday was the last day of tax, so it took a little longer for our CPE certificates to go out, but you should be able to get them by the end of the week. Again, thank you for coming, and please fill out our survey so that you'll get the CPE certificate. And okay, we have one more question. Dawn, you're very popular. Oh, thank you, Dawn. Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Yes.
I'm off to another meeting.
Thank you. All right. Take care. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.